Alright guys, so we are back to talking about the US government shutdown, and at this point it's becoming a yearly ritual, a real kabuki theater and American tradition. It's a reminder that one day in the not so distant future, the US government will default on their debt. It's impossible to pay back at this point. So here's what's going on, because a shutdown is looking more likely. And if you're in the markets, your position is at risk. All assets are now at risk. House Republicans have rejected a funding plan backed by Trump. And we have less than 24 hours before a shutdown happens, so the situation is really serious. Why did the House reject this? Because the spending plan is just out of this world. According to one, the plan is shorter in pages, but it increases the debt by $5 trillion, and this makes it asinine. It's important to remember that whether the US government is red or blue, spending is not coming down. Both sides are to blame, but Trump's policies are going to rocket the debt to new insane levels. Let's recall the level of debt that the Trump presidency could add. His tax cuts and global tariff war are going to cost a lot. It will increase the deficit and force even more government borrowing. His plan is going to raise the national debt by over $7 trillion, and that's the base case here. In the worst case scenario, he will spend well over 15 trillion. And where will this money come from? By issuing bonds and borrowing from the world. It's the same old playbook. Now, what's so controversial about Trump's bill? His plan is a move to raise the debt ceiling once again. In fact, he wants to get rid of the ceiling completely. Basically, a platinum credit card the US can forever swipe without looking at the bill, without looking at the numbers. And let's quantify the disaster we are sitting on. The US debt is at nearly 100% of GDP, and by next year, it would be bigger than the US economy itself. And by 2034, it will hit 122%. Oh, but it gets worse. Because of inflation, the Federal Reserve can't afford to slash rates down to zero. That means Trump will be borrowing money in a high interest rate environment. The net interest cost is around 3.4% of GDP today. In the next 10 years, it would balloon to 4.1%. And that's just the interest payments alone. We can forget about paying down the capital. That can't be done without triggering the Great Depression 2.0. But let's stay on topic here and talk about the shutdown because the consequences are dire. Now, the last time this happened, an estimated 3.5 million federal workers were at risk, except this time it would be more workers going broke. Biden expanded the size of big government, he made it even bigger. So the economic impact is even more insane this time. Now we know eventually this kabuki theater will end. The US government will have to reverse the shutdown because if they don't, they will default on their obligations. And that would mean the US Treasury market collapsing. That would trigger a big downgrade and global markets will soon collapse as well. Everything is all interconnected. Now, if we look at past shutdowns, this chaos could last for weeks on end. In 1995, the shutdown lasted 26 days, and in 2013, it went on for 16 days. However, in 2018, the shutdowns lasted over 35 days in total. That's a whole month where federal workers didn't get paid. And this is a big issue for the US economy. Let's remember nearly 40% of the economy is driven by government spending. The government pays their workers and they spend their salaries consuming stuff. So if that dries up, everything will get impacted. Diners will be empty, grocery chains will crash, and even Amazon will sell less stuff. According to Goldman, a government shutdown would reduce GDP growth by 0.2% a week. So if a shutdown lasts for 10 weeks, it would be a GDP hit of 2%. This is a big reason why all risk assets like stocks are getting clobbered. We have a convergence of economic storms. The Fed just cancelled multiple rate cuts in 2025. And now you have this shutdown looming. Spending from government workers is going to dry up and cutbacks are coming.
And what we're at right now is complete chaos on the Republican side. We have a government shutdown that is looming, that is real. right before Christmas. What we're talking about here is not paying our military members during the holidays, not paying our TSA workers during the holidays, not paying the people that are working on all of our holiday travel, that are out there working for us every single day. So this is an incredibly serious moment.
Now, we know Trump likes to play hardball much more than Joe Biden. Sure, it might get resolved by the time this video goes live, or it could drag on for weeks on end. So yes, things are getting very serious indeed. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about something funny and sad at the same time. Now, a week ago, Trump mocked Canada pretty harshly that Trudeau was the governor of the 51st state of the US, that Canadians want to join the United States, and he's sick of subsidizing them to the tune of $100 million a year. Now, we mentioned before how Canada has to scramble and find a way out. Building trading relations with BRICS and the global south is very important here. Economic growth there is strong, and you can't just rely on the G7, especially the US. But Canada is about to choose the path of appeasement to bow down to Trump's demands. The Ontario Premier is pleading with Trump over trade, that Canada can supply critical minerals to the US, and that the trade war in North America will only benefit the Chinese. And it's really funny how China is once again the boogeyman, the political football to kick around, but this is the twilight zone we are living in. Nothing makes sense anymore, or maybe everything makes perfect sense. So here's the deal. The Premier wants to help the US gain more access to Canada's critical minerals. And this could be a veiled threat, but it looks more like appeasement to me. Now, we know the US has a crisis with their critical mineral supply. China has cut them away from germanium and gallium, and these are materials needed for the US military and chip production. It's a very significant blow. Now, in 2023, Canada shipped 59% of the critical minerals to the US, and that's over $20 billion worth of exports. And this might be a big carrot to dangle in front of Donald Trump. But can this wrest control away from China? Because whoever controls this resource controls future technologies from EVs to solar panels to semiconductors. And here's the amount of dominance: 68% of nickel, 40% of copper, 59% of lithium, and 73% of cobalt are refined in China. It's simply incredible here. The majority of global graphite production and output is also under China's control. 70 to 80% comes from Chinese companies. So if critical minerals are bargaining chip for the Canadians, sure, it might work, because Trump is obsessed with bringing back US manufacturing, and you can't have production without all these inputs. Now, looking at the major clean technologies, China controls the entire supply chain and manufacturing. Nearly 80% for solar PVs, well over 60% for wind and turbine production, around 70% for batteries, and over a third in other critical industries as well. So yes, Canada using China as the boogeyman could prove very effective. However, and once again I need to say however, this just deepens the dependency on the US even further. If Canada doesn't diversify their trading partners, this will happen again and again and again. They will be nothing more than a resource supplier to Trump's economy. So things are getting just downright bizarre. But let's do an update on the US China economic war, because this is the big one, the main cause. In a stunning article, mainstream media is finally starting to admit something that we've said many times now. The trade war is going to hurt US farmers. China is turning to Brazil for their grain supply, and this is one sector Trump can't squeeze Beijing in. China holds tremendous sway in the global food economy. Remember how big their population is: over 1.4 billion people. And that's a lot of mouths to feed. China's trying to be self sufficient for sure, but that is honestly decades away. In the meantime, they have to buy a ton of food from the world. According to the USDA, China is the biggest food exporter in the world. In 2023, total imports hit an incredible $140 billion. US farmers are dependent on Chinese money, and that's the situation today. This is where Trump's trade war could collapse the farming industry, especially farms that grow wheat and grain. A 60% tariff on Chinese goods would most definitely invite retaliation, and China could clobber the US at their weakest point. In 2018, Trump started his tariff war with China. Before that, Beijing was importing around $13 billion of US soybeans a year, and that is precious revenue US farmers need, especially when the cost of production is just so high. But China retaliated. They stopped almost all imports, and that caused a tremendous plunge down to only $3.1 billion of imports. In other words, farmers experienced a 75% hit to their revenues, and this was a total collapse in exports to China. It's a clear and present danger that could repeat in 2025. And that's just in soybeans. We also have US pork, corn, wheat, and cotton. Farmers across the board, they're going to get clobbered in this trade war. Brazil, on the other hand, is going to be the big winner from this disaster. Soybean exports to China are up by 25%. Prices are cheaper, and Brazil is a much friendlier trading partner than the US, at least in China's perspective. They are part of BRICS, and there are clues all over that tell us China is doubling down on the Brazilian supply. They have a contingency plan in the event Trump escalates the economic war. China's top crop trader, COFCO, is going to open a massive port terminal in Santos, Brazil next year. It's the Chinese equivalent of Cargill betting big on Brazil, and this has enormous implications. Firstly, the company is going to control a huge amount of food exports, and by extension, China is also going to benefit. And now they have a local company in control of the supply chains. And if this works out, we can see this playbook getting repeated across Latin America, Peru, Argentina, you name it. The Chinese will be there. So we are witnessing the great diversification of everything. China isn't just moving away from US assets, it's now supply chains as well. Moving away from dollars and treasuries is bad enough, but shunning US supply confirms the two biggest economies are breaking away in every way possible. But let's circle back to the government shutdown. Now I have to state that by the time this goes live, they could have agreed on a new deal. And if they do, then the zombie economy gets to limp along for a while longer. But if they don't, we can expect a bigger crash in the markets. When you have government workers without salaries, it's obvious what would happen. Spending is going to dry up and businesses will be facing a collapse. But let me know what you think. Will the government really shut down? And how far will China decouple from the US? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.